Is monogamy natural? Well, this is a topic I've gotten into years ago. Some of my first videos when I was trying to figure out how to put sentences on screen back just off my Facebook Live, videos. These are some of the things that I had talked about. My friend Rich Cooper, though, from Entrepreneurs in Cars, did a great video on the topic. I'm going to link it down in the description. So when you're done hitting the subscribe button for mine and watch my video till the end, go watch his video and subscribe to his channel too if you haven't already. So it's a good discussion. I agree with most of what he has to say, but I'm going to expand on it because it's an interesting topic. I'm Paul, Apex Mindset. Let's dive in. So, monogamy, is it natural? I think you might be asking yourself the wrong question, though. It's a great discussion to have. It's a great topic to look into and to kind of nerd out over and dive into research on, but you might be asking yourself the wrong question, okay? The question is, what is it that you actually want? What's going to give you the most amount of happiness and fulfillment in your life? And then that's what you do. That's what you go through. Go for. Not what society says is going to make you happy. Not what everybody else says. Not, some virtues out of necessity that somebody's throwing at you or some institutional virtues that somebody's guilting you into trying to have, but what is it that's going to work for you the best? And then you set the goals and the parameters and the environment around yourself to achieve that thing. So I'll use a few examples. Like, it's not natural for me to have the amount of muscle that I have on my body and get down to 8% body fat or so, like I do during the summertime. All right. It's not natural for me to do that. But it's optimizing my physique and it's something I want to do. It's a goal that I have. It makes my life better. And so I set up the environment and conditions around myself to achieve that goal, meaning that I don't buy certain foods when I'm dieting down. I watch my health. I watch I get a blood test done. I look at, what my levels are. I look at my nutrition. I don't put myself in circumstances where I'm drinking to excess all the time, eating to excess all the time, right? There's a number of things I do because what's natural for every person is to be obese or at least have a little bit of fat on them in case there's a famine. All right. And so I'm doing what's unnatural, but to optimize my health and physique. For an entrepreneur to make $1 million in a year, he has to do unnatural things in order to have the discipline, the calculation, and the pre-planning in order to achieve that. If he wants to achieve that goal, he has to give up certain things. He has to structure the environment around himself so he's not distracted and pulled away from his goals, and so he can maximize, optimize his time to achieve the net worth he's trying to achieve, right? If he was doing what his chimpanzee brain told him to do, he would never achieve anything. And so, when it comes to our relationships, the question isn't whether it's natural to have a certain thing. The question is this what is it that I want? What does it look like? Is it monogamy? Is it polyamory? Is it open relationship? Is it non-cohabitating monogamy? Is it a marriage? Is it right? And so you go through all of these options to try to figure out what's going to optimize your happiness and well-being and for what your goals are. That's what you go through. Now, to address the question though, okay, whether our mating strategies are based off of reproductive problems that we're solving. It's not, we have genetic drives, but genetic drivers are not the only factor that's involved. We have environmental stimulation in an outside environment that causes reproductive problems for us that we have to solve. Now, if you don't set any goals in your relationship and you let society, in the way that our current social conditioning dictate how you're going to solve your reproductive problems, what you're going to end up with, at least 90% of you males and females will end up with, is open cuckoldry in the form of serial monogamy. That is what our current society is doing now, based on what our genetic drivers are and based on the outside stimulation, the environment we're in. We are in an environment now where there is serial monogamy and open cuckoldry, where men are devalued and women are selecting through men and discarding them in a very parasitic fashion, and it's leading to unhappiness for both women and both men. Okay, so women are, chasing their sexual exploration strategy, and having sex with whoever they want to have sex with no care about pair bonding in their younger years, often getting pregnant and then expecting another man to take care of that baby when they're in their late 20s, early 30s. That's what open cuckoldry is. Or they're getting in the relationship with a guy who's a resource provider that they're not that excited about, cheating on that guy. And we can look at statistics of actual paternity tests, and what's happened in a large percentage are having babies with other men and expecting some guy to take care of them. And then the majority of marriages are ending in divorce because a woman is initiating the divorce 7 to 10 years later, after that guy is of no more use to her anymore. So this is what a mixture of our internal biological drives added to the environment, with which is an abundance of resources, social media, so you have the appearance of an abundance of options, and all of the stimulation that we have to stimulate both polyamorous drives, but then we create a reproductive problem of who's going to take care of the baby and who's going to take care of the woman. And these are being solved now through a gynocentric social order where you have open cuckoldry and discarding of men, which is both bad for women and men, because how many women are, even though we're optimizing a gynocentric strategy, well, women are greatly unhappy, reporting unhappiness at higher rates. And how many women do you know in their 40s, 50s, and on upward who talk about there are no good men left in the world for them, right? Women can't find men that they want to be with after they've cycled through and discarded men the way that society is promoting for them to do through the environmental stimulation, and through their genetic drivers, by not being intentional with their goals. Okay, just like if I'm not intentional with my financial goals, the state's going to be minimally taking care of me and I'm going to be in poverty when I'm older, right? But if you're intentional with your financial goals, you can have abundance. Well, if you're not intentional with your relationship goals and what you want it to look like, and you let society and your own internal drives reacting to the environment around you dictate where you want to go, that's where you end up. Guys end up discarded, okay, and suicidal and wondering what happened and not being able to see their kids. And women end up cycling through men like Kleenex and nobody's happy. So let's look though at whether or not, though, is it even genetically, is monogamy even a goal we should have? Well, that's a question you have to answer based on the reproductive problems you have. So if we look at it through society, 200,000 years ago, Homo sapiens became a thing, and we were polyamorous for 190,000 years. So genetically speaking, our drive is going to be towards polyamory. But it wasn't so much because we're just a polyamorous species. It was the environmental problems that caused us to have to solve those problems through a lack of technology, a lack of resources, a lack of mating selection options, and through the need to share resources. So we were hunter-gatherer tribes for 190,000 years, where we had to share everything in order to survive and move through territories where resources were abundant. We couldn't survive in a scarce resource environment when we were hunter-gatherers. In walks in the Cultural Revolution 10 to 12,000 years ago. Now, there's a lot of different opinions as to when monogamy became a virtue or a value. Because you have to ask yourself, if we are genetically driven towards polyamory, well, then how come we don't just seamlessly have polyamory today without any problems, issues, or reproductive issues? How come we're not all just happy screwing at each other? Well, we're not, because there are other reproductive problems involved. So the need for paternal certainty, resources, and therefore jealousy became an issue even during when we were hunter-gatherers and polyamorous. We solved that issue through violence and infanticide. And so to protect, you mean killing other people's babies. So to protect against infanticide, that caused women to be more polyamorous as well, meaning they were, having sex with multiple mates outside of their ovulation cycle in order to mask, you know what I mean, whose baby it might be. You know what I mean? It's my Kleenex here. And so, so that was a problem. These are reproductive problems that got solved. The environment, stimulated this problem. The genetic driver for a woman is to have babies with the most genetically viable option and to have resources to take care of them. Whereas a guy's genetic driver is to have access to unlimited sex, because unlimited sex means unlimited reproduction. Now that drive could be met through multiple women, could be met through one woman with unlimited sex with that woman, or it could be met through pornography, right? Like, so you could meet the genetic drive through multitudes of problem solving methods based on your environment. Okay. Now, fast forward though into the agricultural revolution. Now, there's dispute as to when polyamory or when monogamy became a drive or a virtue or a value at all. So it became a virtue with religious, communities about 2,000 years ago. But what genetic studies show, so genetic studies are the actual evidence, because people have different opinions, but they don't have evidence to back the opinion. But our genetics show us that women and men were mate switching a lot less in most of societies when the agricultural revolution happened. So monogamy happened out of necessity 10 to 12,000 years ago. In other words, you had to know that your resources were taking care of your baby. You're no longer sharing resources with a tribe. You're instead growing food in an agricultural environment. You had to pre-plan for resources in that environment, meaning harvests. There are harsh winters, and so with pre-planning for resources in a scarce environment, you no longer had you couldn't afford for the guy next door to not do enough work to supply enough resources, because your resources could take care of your family but couldn't take care of yours and his family. So with sets of society with scarcity of resources, societal rules become in play. And those societal rules and monogamy ends up becoming a solution to a reproductive problem. Also, male-driven polyamory, where men have multiple wives, became the solution to that reproductive problem with the agricultural revolution. Okay, but male-driven polyamorous societies tended to be very violent, where the alpha dominant resource, having males had to dominate over the other males in that society. So to create more peace and, more less violent societies and more survivability for everybody, monogamy ended up becoming the virtue. Okay, and so monogamy was an adaptation to the environment. We have genetic drives, and then we have reproductive problems. We solved those reproductive problems through monogamy when we had scarcity of resources, we needed paternal certainty, and there was a scarcity of options as well. There just weren't as many in certain locations, weren't as many viable females to mate with. There weren't as many viable males to want to mate with. And so the selection, when you found a viable mate, you wanted to keep that mate. And so you set up rules around that. So the natural society to be in a few thousand years ago, society would have naturally pushed you towards a monogamous style relationship, because the environment around you would have supported that, would have caused you to use monogamy to solve that reproductive problem. Fast forward now today, though, we have watched the disassembling of monogamy because we no longer have the outside environmental stimulation to support or promote monogamy. For monogamy to work, you have to have a scarcity of resources. Well, we don't have that in the Western world. There's an abundance of resources. People are not starving to death because they didn't plan their harvest out. Okay, people are buying dollar sandwiches over at McDonald's and surviving just fine. And so we have social support. We have less violent society, all this stuff, which means that resources are abundant even for the most impoverished of individuals. So that makes it so that monogamy is not an adaptation. Not to mention there's an appearance of abundance of sexual options because now we're more connected to the world around us with our phones and with the internet, social media. And so women have an illusion that they have a lot more options that they do have because they can throw a picture of themselves on the internet and then they're going to get 10,000 likes and a bunch of dick pics in their inbox, you know. And guys do have the illusion, not quite as badly as women do, but guys have the illusion of options as well with all this access. And so this means that the reproductive problem is no longer being solved by monogamy. The reproductive problems are being solved right now, anyways, again, by open cuckoldry and serial monogamy. And serial monogamy is really a form of polygamy because you're not sticking with one partner for life or even having that plan. You're going partner to partner to partner throughout your life. So what's the solution? Well, the solution is this. You're not going to get what you want if you don't create the environment around yourself to have it. So if you envision yourself having a monogamous relationship and having the benefits of that kind of relationship into your old age, you have to set up the conditions around yourself so that that can be what your natural drives go towards. Well, what does that mean? Now, that means that you're not on social media, for example, getting attention from dudes or getting attention from women. You're not getting sexual attention in your environment. You're not going out with exes on friend dates people used to bang. You're not going out on girls' night out or, guys, situation and putting yourselves in situations where you're going to have sexual access to other people. You're not having inappropriate relationships with Kevins and sales. You're not even putting yourselves in those situations, right? You have to insulate yourself. Just like if I want to achieve my physique goals, I have to create the environment around myself to achieve that. If I want to achieve entrepreneurial goals, I have to create the environment around myself to achieve that. Well, you have a reproductive problem, okay? You want to mate with somebody, but you also want a number of things that go along with that. And so you're going to have to decide how you want to solve that problem. If you choose monogamy as a means of solving it, you have to understand it's not going to happen naturally because genetically you're going to be driven towards polyamory, and the environments we're in will not naturally push you into a monogamous strategy like it would have a few hundred or even a few thousand years ago. So what you're left with is not that monogamy can't work, but you're left with having to create the conditions around yourself so that monogamy can work for you. That means setting standards for your own behavior and setting boundaries and not just doing what your emotions tell you to do, women, okay? And not just doing what, your chimp brain tells you to do, but setting up the standards and conditions around yourself so that you get your reproductive problems solved through your relationship. If a guy wants unlimited access to sex and that's what his chimpanzee brain wants, then she better have that in his monogamous relationship, or else his chances of sticking and being faithful in that relationship severely go down. And vice versa, women want to mate switch to the better deal. Well, she has to insulate herself from potentials to mate switch then, or else she's going not only to have that temptation, but that's just what she's going to do because that's what the environment and your own internal drives are going to push you towards. It's not like, oh, well, I'm a good person, so I can go out with my ex that I used to sleep with and go over his house and I'll be just fine and get drunk with him and, whatever, right? It's no, that's not how this works. You see, you have to set up the conditions around yourself because if you don't, your internal drivers will open doors up and push you towards doing things that will cause you to violate that monogamous relationship. And if you violate the monogamous relationship and violate the standards that your partner has for you, okay, and that you have for yourself, then you're not going to receive the benefits of what that kind of relationship could give you. And there's a lot of benefits that might be able to give you. Okay. And similarly too, like how are you setting up? Are you getting just married and then having the state just reward the woman for breaking up with you by taking all your resources? Or are you doing a prenuptial agreement? Are you doing things on paper, so that if there is a divorce, she's not getting rewarded for breaking up with you. You know what I'm saying? And so these are things that you have to do to set up the external environment around you so it promotes monogamous behavior and not promoting what your internal drive is going to push you towards based on 190,000 years of genetics, as well as what the environment is going to push you towards. Okay. And so that is the answer. If you decide what you want, okay, the question isn't, is monogamy natural? The question is, what do I want? And I'll assure you this though. What you don't want is what society is going to hand you. And society is going to hand you open cuckoldry in the form of serial monogamy, where women end up lonely and sad and used up in their older age. Guys end up resource broke and beaten up and discouraged and devalued, and nobody's happy. That's not the answer. That's what society is going to point you towards based on your drives and based on how our social conditioning is telling us to solve reproductive problems. If you do nothing, you don't set goals, you don't do any pre-planning, and you don't set standards for your relationship and for yourself, that is where you will end up. Okay? So if you don't want that, and I don't recommend that, decide what you want that relationship to look like. Do you just want to date and never be committed? That's fine if that's what you want. Do you want monogamous relationship and the bells and whistles in marriage or whatever in a religious order? You're a religious person. That's what you want. Okay, that's fine. Do you want some form of, you know, committed polyamory or committed, open monogamy, some form of, or maybe non-cohabitating long-term relationship, or, there's all different kinds of versions. You decide what's best for you, and then you have to set the conditions and the environment around yourself in order to have the benefits of that thing that you set up as a goal. That's what you have to do. The question isn't whether or not it's natural. The question, because what's natural isn't necessarily going to be what's good for you. Okay, the question is, what do I want? And then go out and get it. Thanks for tuning in. If you have questions, comments, hit them up in the comments section. We can talk more about the science behind this stuff maybe in another video. Certainly could have longer discussions and really nerd out on the research and data and talk about these sorts of things if you guys want to. But let me know what you think. And again, thanks for tuning in and subscribing.